Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Centre. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about helping patients with hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First to his hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the E of ENT. I've performed over 10,000 ear surgeries, and I've taken care of many more with hearing loss. I'm the founder of Listen Up Hearing Centre and written a book of the same name, Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to listenuphearing.com. That's listenuphearing.com. Today, we have a great guest. It's Nashlea Brogan. She is a doctor of audiology, and she decided to become a doctor of audiology when she started to lose her own hearing at the age of 18. Her hearing worsened over the years, and then she eventually became completely deaf. During that time, she had an excellent audiologist who encouraged her and inspired her to become a doctor of audiology. Before getting a cochlear implant years later, Nashlea grew to understand that hearing loss isn't just a health issue that can be resolved with hearing aids. It affects your whole life, your schooling, work, social life, and personal relationships. And that's what we want to explore more today. She knew that in order to fully help people, she needed to take a holistic approach to caring for the physical, emotional, and lifestyle hearing needs of her patients. She devotes a lot of time to counseling patients to help them to be successfully adapt to the new hearing lifestyle, and has created a specialized team at Bluewater Hearing to extend that level of care over the lifespan of treatment. Thank you for coming on, Nashlea. It's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here today.
Oh, no, this is great. And so, what I really appreciate is perhaps a willingness for you to share your own journey. We talked a little bit about that during the warm up. And so just, you don't have to get into the specifics, but just, how about you talk a little bit about how your hearing loss affected you gradually, some of the things you probably didn't initially realize, and maybe took a little bit later to realize how much impact that it had on you.
Oh, for sure. So it actually goes back a little bit before I was 18. 18 was when I fitted with hearing aids. But when I was 14 years old, I was a very extreme extrovert, competitive Highland dancer, playing 3 musical instruments. And I noticed that I was having difficulty hearing people in the back seat of the car or in the car. And even though I was doing well in school, there was just certain areas where people said, Nashlea, you're so smart, but you're so dull. You're always daydreaming. Or I'd be walking down the hallway and they would think I was a snob because I wouldn't say hello to them. And these little things started happening. And I first went and had my hearing tested. And at that time, they just identified me with a post-lingual late onset hearing loss, progressive hearing loss, but nothing was done. This is back with analog hearing aids, 1991, 92. So there wasn't enough hearing aid to actually amplify my hearing loss because of the way it's sloped. So that was it. I went home. We seen an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I was cleared. And then when I was 18, I graduated from high school and I went to see another audiologist and ear, nose, and throat specialist. And that's where my journey began. So the audiologist, I saw them as phenomenal. She supported me. I was just getting ready to go to France for a year, 4 weeks later. So they fit me with 2 hearing aids. And 4 weeks later, I went to live in France, Nice, France, with a French family who spoke no English.
Wow.
And so it was quite the start of my hearing loss, because in Europe, people would sign to me when they saw me with hearing aids. So here I am, this extrovert, graduated a top student, competitive dancer, knew I had a hearing loss, but didn't really think of it as a disability. And I'm in Europe only a month later, and people were trying to sign to me, and I didn't know how to react. In the beginning, I was kind of like, I just wore my hearing aids. I was told in the beginning, you have to wear these because one day you will need a cochlear implant, so you have to stimulate your brain as much as possible. So I wore them from the morning I woke up to when I went to bedtime. But then the things started happening where I started to get judged with my hearing loss. In the beginning, I didn't think a whole lot of it, but then it was people and how they treated me. So then people would say, do you really not hear, or are you just not paying attention? Nashlea, can't you get something better, more expensive? Are they just not working for you? That's when the emotions, and for me, actually, the stigma with hearing loss started kicking in more. What other people were imposing on me more than what I thought of myself. And I would go back to my audiologist every year, and she would say, you needed to go into audiology. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not having anything to do with this. And I was studying biology and psychology at the time. and falling in love with psychology. And then she gave me the articles by Mark Ross, who's like the father of oral rehabilitation and audiology. And I read his articles and I seen his group support posts, and I'm like, I want to do this. Like, I want to counsel people with hearing loss. So that's when I decided to go into audiology. I went off to Western Ontario to do my master's degree. And again, ran into whole different experiences, because what I found was being an audiology student with hearing aids surrounded by audiologists, they didn't know what to do with me. I know that sounds weird. I was judged based on how I could do hearing tests, whether I was going to be able to word discrimination, whether I was going to be able to do a listening check on a hearing aid. And even just last month, I was speaking to a student at another university in North America, and she's going through the same issues right now in audiology. She's like, they're worried that how am I going to do a listening check on a hearing aid? And nobody ever pulled me up and said, Jeannie, you're going to have other skills that are going to make you very valuable for the profession. I was being judged on my ability and whether I could count words or I could listen to a hearing aid through a listening tube. So it was a very emotional couple of years for me. And I was, again, battling. I cut all my hair off. I went from long hair to short hair. So I'd wear all the big hearing aids. And I kind of was going to that area where I got to accept my hearing loss identity and go with it. And because other people made me feel like that. And the audiology students kept saying to me, why did you get a cochlear implant now? Why did you get a cochlear implant now? And I had normal hearing at that point up to around 1,000 hertz when I was at audiology school. And then eventually by the time I finished, it was around 750. But I didn't want a cochlear implant. And I didn't like people telling me that I needed to get one then. I'm like, I'm not ready. But for some reason, they just all wanted to fix me. And that was my early years where I didn't like that, because I was actually doing very well with hearing aids at that time, right? I was socially active, enjoying my career. I used an FM system while testing people. And when I went through audiology and graduated, I went through all the emotional aspects of dating with the hearing loss. Like, you're going to be judged by your hearing loss. Will someone accept you for your hearing loss? And I met my husband, and he was very understanding. And then I opened up Bluewater Hearing, and here we are. And then that was my desire to create my hearing center, where we look at the device, but we also kind of respect where the person is, where their family is. So we're always trying to tap into their emotions so that I'm not really judging them, like trying to fix them. Because I do believe we need to do all in audiology, to do really good diagnostics, real good fittings. But I also believe there's a whole person and family behind that. And I think sometimes we focus a little bit too much on the diagnostics and testing and not enough on where they are. Because I believe hearing loss is for life. So once we fit someone with hearing devices, we have 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And our treatment plan's always going to be changing in the next 30, 40 years. We're always going to be adjusting it. So we as clinicians are supposed to be tapping into where they are as their life changes and other things happen in their life. Because I went through so many life experiences. And then I got to cochlear implants. In 2012 and 2013, I was part of a Medell cochlear implant study. So they did 1 year, and I went through all these tests, pre and post, and then the other year. And by the time I got my cochlear implants, I hadn't talked on the telephone in 10 years. And they activated me on my one side, and I went to the restaurant right after activation, like a couple hours later. And I was like, oh, it's AC/DC. I could hear the music. I could hear speech within hours. Everything was crystal clear. I could hear all the musical instruments within a week. And I was talking on the telephone within a few weeks. And it was just like all my hearing from my childhood came back to me. So it was pretty profound getting a cochlear implant for me. And I didn't expect that. They actually were giving me counseling beforehand, saying I had a very negative view that it wasn't going to work, because in audiology, I was thinking about all the complications with getting a cochlear implant. It might not work. We don't know what caused your hearing loss. My sister has identical hearing loss to me. She's a lawyer in Toronto. We think it's a recessive gene on both sides of our family. And my mother's brother had it. Exact same progression, same onset, everything. And she also has 2 cochlear implants now too, and doing very well. But every thought and feeling, emotion we went through, and she's gone through too. And it's fascinating, because even though we've had identical hearing losses, but I was an audiologist 7 years older than her, she went through very different acceptance, emotions, and everything that I did. So that's where I think that hearing loss is just so unique for each person and each family, because not everybody accepts it the same way. And when we go home and we have these little things in our hands and we got to wear them, we all feel very differently in those, that I think.
No, that's an amazing story. Just as a quick update for the listeners, Nashlea's story is wonderful, but perhaps in the upper echelon of how people do with cochlear implants immediately after initial stimulation. So there are people who are appreciating music and having conversation and on the telephone in a couple of weeks, but I just want to let the listeners know she's an outlier in terms of really being, and you know that, right? And
I tell people that when people ask me, I say, my sister actually took 6 months to a year, almost a year, to be able to talk on the telephone. And it was fascinating. So 2 siblings, identical progression, identical hearing loss, identical both Medell, and both very different post-activation. So what I went through activating me was completely different than her with both implants, our first and our second. And I've had patients, and I always tell them that you can't even compare years, let alone can you compare between people almost. Like it's everybody, it's always different. And I didn't expect it to work. So I thought I was going to hear beeps for 6 months or not hear much sleep. Or I did hear a little bit of the robotic helium for the first few hours. It was just as the hours went on, it went down. But I did have an initial, like everyone sounded like Mickey Mouse for about an hour or two while we were in the office. But I know my situation is not the norm.
Yeah. Well, what do you attribute that to? I mean, just out of curiosity, like, when you try to counsel patients, what do you attribute that to?
So I've always told patients, and like I go back to when my audiologist, when I was 18, I listen to what people tell me. I'm one of those people, if you tell me to do this, I might get my back up, but then I go home and I will do it and apply it. And I was told to always wear my hearing aids because I was going to need cochlear implants someday. So I would wake up at 6 a.m. and wear them until 10 p.m. at night. And even when I didn't feel like they were working, I wore them. And I believe so much in the auditory stimulation and how important it is. I also listen to a lot of music. Like I said, I played musical instruments. I listen to music. I always stayed social active with my hearing loss. So I think there was a lot of auditory stimulation going on just with my lifestyle. And then once I got active, like even today, I listen to podcasts and music for 2 to 3 hours a day underneath my headphones right now. And I turned captioning off. Like my first couple of months with my implants, I turned captioning off and forced myself to watch TV with nose closed captioning. I forced myself to listen to the old music and the new music because I knew that most people can hear the music from when they were younger, but they can't hear new music. So I was very actively trying to always stimulate my auditory system as much as I can. And I think I still do every day now.
Yeah, that's great. And for the listeners, a real important point. What Nashlea's describing is she couldn't speak on the phone for 10 years, yet was still using hearing aids in both ears. And that's honestly unusual. I think most people oftentimes will cease. And I think you had great advice from your audiologist. And what do you tell? So now you probably have patients who are in the same boat. And how do you counsel them? So it's kind of interesting.
Exact same thing. We just had one this week, and they came in with a hearing loss, and I said, you have to wear the hearing aids. And they were like, but it's just, I said, it gives you some sound localization. It still gives you it doesn't give you localization, but it gives you perception of awareness. It's the awareness, right? And I said, that's all I really had in my last few years. And I've had some pediatric cases where one ear was going to the other. And I told the parents, I'm like, no, they're like, she keeps taking it. And I'm like, no, you have to make her wear it. And what do you know? She gets a cochlear implant and she's doing phenomenal. And the parents came back and like, Nashlea, if it wasn't for you constantly telling us that she has to wear, because one day her brain's going to need this for the cochlear implant. And she did very well with the cochlear implant. And I've had quite a few patients like that. And I've noticed that patients who tend to wear the devices, no matter how horribly they sound, just to get that awareness, tend to seem to do quite well with implants. I mean, I obviously don't have studies on it, but it's just I do counsel them on that. And I'm a strong believer. Like I said, we just had someone this week with 10% word discrimination in the 1 year. And we are trying them because it was a very, very rapid change in the last 6 months. But we're trying the cochlear implant program, but here that could take 6 months to a year. So I'm like, we need to keep this side stimulated as much as possible while you're waiting. And then because even if not, when they go to the cochlear implant program 6 months, a year from now, by the time they get in, they're going to put a hearing aid on them before they fit them. So let's start now and just try to keep that going until that time. I don't think you get hurt.
No, I agree with you. That probably is the least. Is it's not going to hurt you, except for obviously the effort to wear it. But I agree 100%. And obviously, anecdotally, I think people who wear it do better. And so, when you talk about your approach to hearing loss, when you talk to people about, their schooling and their work and their social life and personal relationships, can you tell us a little bit about like what you're exploring with these people? I mean, it's kind of interesting when you listen to what your audiologic student colleagues, they very much took a technology approach, right? Get this technology as compared to kind of a more holistic approach where you were. And actually, they might not have even have known your audiogram to know whether or not you actually qualified at that time. It's kind of interesting.
I I like to talk about the impact on relationships and life. So there's a few things. Anxiety is a big word that comes to mind for me. And the other one, avoidance, and the other one is relationship. So with the anxiety and avoidance, even when, for example, I was just in Mexico with a friend who's an audiologist, and she didn't know that when I went to the beach, there's a whole process for me because I got to have my cases to put the devices in. I got to think about the waterproof covers. I can't go in the water. If I go in the water and I take them off and my hair is wet, then I can't put them back on. And this is usually what I experienced with other hearing care professionals. So with me, with my patients, it's like, you're going to the airport. How do you feel about going through airport security and getting on a plane? Do you have your chargers packed in your carry-on bag? Because if they lose your luggage, you're not going to be able to wear them, especially with rechargeable. When you go to bed at night, I did it last night a million times in my life. I knock everything off my side table in the middle of the night, trying to get them where they're charging and plugged in. So where are you going to place them? If they do get wet, what is your plan? So that you don't panic. So a lot of the things, because once we give people these little devices, now they're wearing them, but they're taking care of them. And all the diagnostics and real ears and testing, like that's been done. But now this person got to figure out, I'm going here and I could drop the battery in the car. How do you get the battery from underneath the car seat? Or do you have backup batteries? Like just the real little things that happen when you're relying on these devices to hear all the time. How do you wear a tube or a baseball cap? Because you're still a human being. Like you still want to do normal things that everybody else does. You still want to go get on a boat, or I live by Lake Huron and people go yachting and boating. Do you worry about, are they going to fly off in the wind, or do I have a certain cap on? So a lot of times it's talking about you're going to get your hair cut. I don't want you leaving them at home, but I don't want you rolling them out with Kleenex when the hairdresser tells you to take them out. So it's just discussions about what happens in the everyday life situations once they're given these. And and they're expensive little computers now, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. So they got to be taken care of, and the person has to be prepared for going to the hospital for surgery. I've had a few surgeries where they want to take them off of you. And I want to have them on me when I wake up. Even my first cochlear implants, my second cochlear implant surgery, my second one.
The other side on, right?
Yeah, but no, they took it. And I'm waking up and they're all trying to talk to me. And I'm like, where's my implant? And it's like they were supposed to leave it on the top on me so I could put it on. But so now patients are going for surgery with their hearing aids. Ask them if you can bring a label cup. And I actually told the patients a month ago, make sure they leave it on you when you're going to surgery. Don't put it somewhere. So if you want it when you wake up, it needs to be there. Because a lot of people, they end up going missing. So there are things.
Just as a quick comment, that's actually why people typically take them away and hand them to your family, because the surgery operating rooms have learned of the economic impact of a lost device is significant. So you're absolutely right. It's just, I'm actually thinking about it right now because I have tons of patients who come in with hearing devices that we typically turn them off and hand them to their loved ones, because then we at least know the chain of custody. But you're absolutely right. As they're waking up, it's very challenging.
And the loved ones they don't have hearing loss, so they don't understand how urgent it is. They're more worried about you, but they're not thinking about the hearing unless you have a profound loss. Most of them are thinking about it. So I think sometimes it's if you're used to wearing them every day, then it's nice to have your senses back, especially when you're groggy and waking up. And the other thing is relationships is in one issue area that I want to explore more in the future, but I see with my own patients is relationships. I've had patients tell me it interferes with my sexual relationship with my husband or wife because I can't hear anything when I take my hearing aids out. And I always think about how we know that 50% of divorces are communication breakdown, and all you hear about is communication, but nobody ever talks about hearing loss. How many people we know that under 20% of people with hearing loss are treated. Right? So that means 80% are. So how many people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s are in these relationships where they're arguing over stuff and the hearing loss is playing a role, but nobody knows there even is a hearing loss. So I see a lot when I see partners talking, because I think sometimes we want to include the companion, but we still got to address the person we're talking to. It's a very delicate balance because we don't know their relationship situation. Right. And I think it's very important that as clinicians, we got to understand that we're not supposed to make the person a hearing loss seem inferior to their spouse or their family, though, either. We're not making them handicapped or disabled. And it's a very delicate balance counseling wise with the family members, clinicians, because we're not supposed to be enabling the family to have bad behavior either, right? So it's that counseling between them, because you just don't know the dynamics of their relationship at home.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I agree 1,000% with you. The motivation to bring spouses has been predominantly off of the data that patients are more likely to pursue treatment if their spouse is brought, right? And so not that that's not important, but it's a little bit more of a bludgeoning rather than a, really understanding the holistic impact of the hearing loss, right? I mean, that's...
I love having the family members there 100%, but when we do that, we just have to realize that we can't think that their relationships like our relationship, like they could be at home having marrows or problems too. Like you just don't know. So I think in audiology, when we deal with families and couples, there's a very delicate balance when we're talking to those family members. I mean, I've seen family members fight in the room. I've seen them yell at each other. I've seen manipulation. I've seen not nice stuff said to the person with the hearing loss.
Well, there's oftentimes a power differential where the person with hearing loss is so dependent on the hearing person. And, I've actually seen a decent number of people in their middle age who get implanted where they have a relationship that the dynamic is totally based on that codependency. And then when the implanted patient becomes liberated, for lack of a better word, the commonality of the relationship goes away. And so I've seen several patients split in their middle age because all of a sudden the patient with the implant now feels much more empowered and doesn't have to be kind of under the guise or whatever word you want to use of the hearing person. So you're absolutely right. It's fascinating. So, you're talking about all these different things. Like, what are your top hacks? I mean, like, I don't know. I never really thought about it. Like, how do you get the battery from underneath the car seat? I guess
you have to make sure you just have backup ones. I think it's having a lot of the is preparation, right? So it's identifying areas in your life. So on my Instagram, for example, that's where I post videos on living with the hearing loss. So I'll say I'm going to an airport and this is what I'm thinking about, because every airport's different. And then if I'm traveling, this is like the bag of stuff I pack, which is like backup batteries and a dryer and maybe a headband. So a lot of it is teaching the people to plan in advance. A lot of situations are the same over and over again once the person has been taught to plan and taught to expect. When you're traveling, this is what happens. When you go to work, teaching people like what to expect at work. I'm a big believer a person with the hearing loss has to take a lot of it on themselves, because their family and their peers and their coworkers, they just have normal hearing and they're not thinking about it. I mean, you can teach them so much, but they tend to forget because they're not actively thinking about it all day long. So when the person we try to empower the person with the hearing loss themselves to be their own best, like, super person taking care of themselves. Sure. Not everybody wants to be a hearing loss advocate, though. And I respect that. I think trying to make people hearing loss advocates, so can also be a negative. So it's that gentle balance between just lifestyle tips. Like, when you go on vacation, you should be preparing. When you go to the hospital, you should prepare. A lot of this is preparation and planning for different situations in life that are not the routine.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Some people hug their hearing loss, if you will. I mean, I remember I've had some patients who come in with name tags that say, their name and then I am hard of hearing. That certainly is hugging it as compared to other people who want it to be rehabilitated and don't really want to know. I mean, honestly, if I didn't know you had a cochlear implant, I think there'd be no suggestion that you have any hearing loss whatsoever based on our conversation.
Thank you. And that's how I like to treat my patients. So I'm a big believer that, the 80-20% rule, 80% of my patients, they just want to have their hearing treated. They want to figure out how to get around their hearing loss situations, to live life normally. They don't want to be thinking about it all the time. And they just want it to help, like, live with it, right? And get through life. So that's the way I approach the patients. And I fit more in with that group than obviously I do the patients. And I do have some patients who are very empowered, but I know that's the minority. And I'm very happy when my patients are like, Nashlea, like, I'm going on vacation, I have all this stuff packed, and I know that they're prepared. That's what matters to me.
Yeah, it's funny because I have patients who say, when I'm wearing my devices, I can't really tell a difference, or I can't even recollect that they're on. I go, that's perfect. That's exactly what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to make you whole, and you're not supposed to be aware that you have a hearing loss or that you're wearing a device. And so it's a different bit of a mindset.
I love when they tell me they got in the shower by accident. I'm like, that is my goal. Like, if you,
Right. You jump into the pool or you wear the shower. They're like, I can't believe I did. I said, no, it means you're so used to wearing them that you aren't so conscientious that you, exactly. But, obviously a bit of an expensive mistake sometimes.
I did that though, even when I didn't talk on the telephone, like even with the severe hearing loss in the years before I got my cochlear implants, I still did those things. So that can apply from a mild hearing loss to severe hearing loss, that I would go to sleep with them on or forget I had them in. So they were just part of me. And I love when people get to that point that their hearing loss is it's just part of who they are, and they're functioning very well and accepting it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, one of the most common things, I hear from patients is, they will tell other people that they can't hear them when they don't see their face, right? Because they don't have good lip reading skills. And I always try to explain to them, like, well, that's a philosophical approach where you're kind of blaming the speaker rather than acknowledging your hearing loss, right? Because the real statement is, I can't make up for my hearing loss with my eyes when I don't see your face, which is different than I can't hear you when I don't see your face. And so getting to that mindset where you're acknowledging your hearing loss is a bit of the spectrum of social acceptance.
You're accepting it, because I not all situations, and that's another thing I try to talk to patients with. It's expectations. We can't solve all situations. Sometimes it sucks to have a hearing loss. We can't fix all realities. And once you know where you are and your limitations with your hearing loss, then you should navigate it based on knowing your own limitations. And every hearing impaired person or hearing person with hearing loss has different limitations. You can't even compare yourself, but like, I know when I'm going to struggle and not. And that's what's more important than trying to fix every situation. I don't like when they're trying to always fix every situation. Like the restaurant, for example, tips to hear in a restaurant. It's good to be aware of them, but you don't always get to pick when to go to a restaurant. You don't always get to select a booth. You don't always get to sit away from the window. So the person still has to feel whole in themselves in those situations. So we can't also always be walking around. I think it's unhealthy sometimes when you're always walking around thinking that way, because then you're always so aware that you have a hearing loss too, right? So
that's the avoidance, right? That's the slow, gradual social isolation, right? Where you avoid those circumstances because you haven't rehabilitated your hearing loss. But no, I agree. I mean, one of the things also is understanding that normal hearing individuals have problems in some restaurants, right? And so, what is normal is not like the bionic woman from our youth. It's not being Lindsay Wagner and being able to hear in any circumstance. That's just not the way it is, right?
I've gotten good at, like, I don't expect my family to do anything different with me. So really, I hear very well in noise, but say it's a super noisy restaurant and I go in and I'll look at them and I'll say, how do you find this? Like, oh, Mom, like everybody's yelling. And I'll just say, this is really noisy for me, just so you know. But like, I don't expect them to read my mind and know what to do beforehand. It's just my children who are 14 and 17 know that if I say to them, help me out here, they'll help me out. So I'll ask them for help when I need it, but they only know, like, I'll just ask them. So I don't expect them to know when I'm struggling. I just ask them for help and they know how to help me.
No, that's wonderful. So that's an interesting dynamic, a parent with the children. So what other ways, how do you educate them about it? Or you don't?
They know, they've grown up with it. So they know to tap me on my shoulder or say my name before they speak to me. They know really not, I mean, I can hear from another room now with the cochlear implant, but they know not to have a conversation. I feel like my children have, I feel like my children have developed more, they're more sensitive to people who need help. So I noticed that they're more sensitive, but I haven't really done a lot with them. It's just more, they know, like, if I say, hey, can I switch seats with you in the restaurant? I'll ask them and then I will change seats. So they're just more sensitive to knowing that sometimes I'll be asking them for help and they help me.
Oh, that's very nice. So, I mean, the one thing that's interesting is conversation I think I have multiple times daily is, why should people be able to have conversations from the other room? And why shouldn't people get people's attention before they start talking to them? So in a lot of ways, it's what I call communication hygiene, right? Just having good communication, regardless of hearing impairment, right? Like, people go, well, we have a lot of problems having conversations with the TV on. I was like, oh, are you supposed to be able to have conversations while watching TV? I mean, it's an interesting expectation. In the old days, I think people used to talk story, right? They get in a room and kind of visit and just talk to each other. And I think there's so many other things people are trying to do simultaneously. It's very difficult.
It is. And I think, and that's just life skills. So like for my kids, I think I don't try to make it about my hearing loss and being here with it. It's more, they're just learning life skills. Like, even when my daughter goes out in public, when she's talking to someone at the cashier, I'll say, you should look at the lady when you're talking to her or talk louder. If I'm noticing, if I can't hear and the cashier can't hear, I'll say, talk louder, Rochelle. So I think that they're just life skills they're going to need for work and school and everything. So yeah, they're not really related to hearing loss, but they obviously help if you have a hearing loss.
So tell me a little bit about Bluewater Hearing. Where is it? How do people find it? What would be, if they were looking for you, how would they find it?
Bluewater Hearing. So we're in Sarnia, Ontario, and that is on the border of Michigan. I have a team of 4 clinicians and 10 staff with 2 audiology assistants. And they can find us on social media. So I have Facebook, Bluewater Hearing, the website. I'm very active on Instagram under my name, where I post a lot of stuff about living with the hearing loss and strategies. And with Bluewater Hearing, with my team, my sister, Michelle, so she's the one who doesn't have a hearing loss. She founded Bluewater Hearing with me 19 years ago. So we've been in Sarnia for 19 years.
Is she an audiologist as well?
She's a hearing instrument specialist.
Okay, great.
So she's a hearing specialist. So she moved back and she's a hearing specialist. And she was the one who helped me with my hearing when I couldn't hear, do everything. So I was kind of like growing the practice, and then she would help me in areas that I couldn't hear, like a listening check on a hearing aid. Now we have 2 audiologists and 3 HIS and staff and 2 audiology assistants. And we do cognitive screening. We do a lot of treatment planning. We do floor rehabilitation, like auditory training. Obviously dispensing devices and treatment planning. I'm trying to change the practice a lot right now. We're going through a model where there's a lot more assessments at the beginning, because we're treating a lot more subclinical hearing losses now. And we're doing also auditory processing, but with the cognitive screening, we're picking up on more people who have trouble processing information. And now we're looking at more like the treatment plan, but like a lifetime approach. Because I always felt like before we definitely used to have more of the regular model, where now it's like we're seeing this person and what's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So more of a long-term approach is what we're doing at our practice right now.
So how do you communicate that, or how is that? If you're 40, your life expectancy is another approximately 40 years. So you would expect that. Is it just kind of getting people to understand that it's a lifetime of treatment, or what other approaches?
We tell them it's a lifetime. We tell them it's a lifetime of treatment now. So when they come in, our initial assessments now are 2 hours long. We do the cognitive screening. We do all the diagnostic speech and noise assessments. We do a 3D ear scan. And then we do high frequency audiometry. And then we talk to them about HHIA and some lifestyle measures. And then we do talk to them about how it will be it's a lifetime approach. And this is what they're going to need now. And then how we're going to see them. I like Amplify, which is the auditory training. So I call it physiotherapy for the brain, but we fit them with devices and see if we can get them at home doing a little bit more than just wearing them. It's not for everybody, but for a lot of patients, it gets them more active in their own rehabilitation program. I think audiology is the only area where we fit them with devices and send them home. But the devices are the treatment where I say, like, you go for anything else like surgery, then you have physiotherapy combined with it, where you're in the first 6 to 8, 12 weeks doing something yourself beyond just wearing the devices. So right now we're in the area where we're trying to have the patients more engaged in their own treatment after they get devices, to realize it's not just simply wearing them. There's a lot of other skills that need to be tweaked in that first 8 to 12 weeks.
That's great. That's great. So for the listeners, again, this is Nashlea Brogan. She's a doctor of audiology from Bluewater Hearing. Nashlea, what's your favorite sound?
My budgies. I have budgies.
What are budgies?
I have budgies. My budgies chirping. So I had budgies when I was younger, and birds. I had budgies when I was younger, and then I could not hear them as I lost all my hearing, because I had normal hearing. They think,
but they were high pitched.
They're high pitched. So I have 2 budgies in my house now that are screeching all day long, and I just love the sound of them, because I didn't hear them for so long. I heard them. I loved them when I was little, and then I love the sound of birds. That's
great. Nashlea, this has been a wonderful episode. I thank you so much for coming on Listen Up. And again, for people, this is Nashlea Brogan. She's a doctor of audiology from Bluewater Hearing. Thanks again, Nashlea.
Thank you so much. And you have a great day.
You too. This has been great. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.